What happens when you take the literal desk where Gone with the Wind was written and you put it in the exact same museum complex as a gallery detailing the absolute darkest realities of Jim Crow and segregation?
Oh, man. I mean, you definitely don't get a sanitized, glossy textbook version of a major city, that's for sure.
Right, exactly. You get this huge historical collision. You get the completely unvarnished truth with all its soaring triumphs, devastating mistakes, and fierce controversies. And it's all gathered in one physical space, just waiting for you to make sense of it.
Which is so rare. We usually experience history in these, highly fragmented, isolated little pieces. Like you might read a plaque on a historic building on your way to work, or
like skim a textbook chapter if you're researching a specific event.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But placing conflicting historical realities in the same environment, it forces a totally different kind of processing. It removes the luxury of just ignoring the messy parts of human progression.
And that is the exact tension we are exploring in today's deep dive. We are unpacking this genuinely fascinating travel blog post written by Louis over at Red Solo Traveler.
Great post, dated March 16th, 2026, right?
Yep, that's the one. And the subject is the Atlanta History Center. So our mission today is to figure out how this specific museum curates such a complex historical narrative. I mean, they cover everything from the roaring physical machinery of early railroads to, well, deeply polarizing literature.
And we really want to distill why engaging with that kind of transparent, unfiltered history is arguably the ultimate shortcut to being a truly well-informed person.
Because being well-informed requires moving beyond just memorizing dates or names.
Oh, absolutely. It demands an understanding of the mechanical gears of how a society actually evolves, like seeing the direct causality between a logistical decision made a century ago and the economic reality of the streets you're walking on right now.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because to understand a city's history, we really have to start by understanding the physical mechanics of how it was actually built.
Right, the literal foundation.
Yeah, so the blog post takes us to the physical space of the center itself, which is located in this northern suburban enclave of Buckhead. And the author notes how you're immediately greeted by these really beautiful, serene gardens.
It sounds lovely.
It is. The architecture is this striking, harmonious blend of modern design and traditional Southern elements. You have this very quiet, rooted environment.
But I'm guessing that serenity is a bit of a trick.
Totally. It is a massive juxtaposition to the sheer industrial force of what sits inside the first major gallery.
Right. The physical environment deliberately sets a stage of calm reflection before plunging you into, the violent, roaring mechanics of urban foundation.
Exactly. And that industrial force is the locomotion, railroads, and the making of Atlanta Gallery. The post describes this massive, fully restored locomotive sitting right there in the exhibit.
Wow. Just parked right in the room.
Yeah. It represents the trains that were completely prevalent throughout the city's history. And, when reading this, the parallel to modern technology is just unavoidable for me.
How so?
Well, the 19th century railroad was essentially the physical version of the early internet.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. Just as the internet standardized the transfer of data, these massive iron tracks forced a standardization of physical reality. Before the train, you had isolated hubs. You were limited by, the distance a horse could walk in a day.
Yeah, the world was incredibly localized.
Very. And then suddenly you lay down these iron tracks and you inject massive external steam energy into a localized system. You completely shift the bottleneck of human progress. It makes me wonder, how does standing next to a machine like that change our perspective on how modern metropolises just seem to spring up out of nowhere?
What's fascinating here is the actual mechanics of that shift. When you stand next to a piece of machinery that massive, it entirely removes the abstraction of history.
It makes it real.
Exactly. It forces a confrontation with the sheer back-breaking logistics required to build a metropolis. I mean, we have a tendency to think of cities as these inevitable cultural centers that just organically grew because people wanted community.
Right, like they just decided to hang out together.
Yeah, but the presence of that locomotive explains the mechanical why. Atlanta exists and survived strictly because of transportation logistics. The iron tracks dictated the urban foundation.
Whoever controls the movement of heavy goods dictates the economic lifeblood of a region.
Precisely. It wasn't some magical cultural magnet. It was iron, steam pressure, and highly calculated geography.
It makes you realize that before the railroad, towns literally ran on their own local sundial time. The logistical demands of coordinating massive high-speed machines on a single track, it literally forced America to invent standardized time zones.
That's right. The iron track forced a shared reality.
And controlling that track meant controlling the future.
Because the infrastructure was the ultimate leverage. The physical reality of the locomotive demonstrates that culture is often just, a downstream effect of supply chain dominance.
Well, yeah. But iron tracks and steam engines are just the dead machinery, right? From the iron that laid the physical foundation, the narrative has to transition to the actual human beings who collided at that crossroads.
Absolutely. The infrastructure simply facilitated the massive influx of diverse people, and those people ultimately shaped the region's soul.
Because a city is really just a container.
Yeah, the friction of the people inside that container is what generates the actual history.
Which brings the blog post to the main permanent gallery at the center. It's aptly named Gather Round. The blogger heavily emphasizes that this gallery presents Atlanta's history in a manner that is completely transparent and truthful.
Meaning they don't shy away from the bad stuff.
Exactly. The stated goal is to educate the visitor, not to overwhelm them with a single line of propaganda, and the scope they attempt to cover is massive.
What kind of timeline are we talking about?
They move through the Native American tribes of northern Georgia, the brutal realities of the Civil War, the deep wounds of segregation, the sweeping triumphs of the Civil Rights Movement, the global spotlight of the Olympics.
Oh, wow. That is a huge range.
Yeah, and even artifacts from established corporate giants that call the city home. And they do it using this whole arsenal of interactive media, recording booths, immersive sensory experiences, and meet the past live theater performances.
Capturing that extreme breadth of human experience within one permanent exhibition, that requires an intensely delicate curatorial balance.
Oh, for sure.
It really risks becoming an incoherent jumble if it's not anchored by a very strong core philosophical approach to learning.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because the blogger praises this transparency. But I have a major hypothesis here. Isn't all museum curation on a fundamental level just a sophisticated PR firm for the past?
That's a cynical way to look at it, but go on.
Someone in a back room is still choosing what goes in the glass display case and what stays locked in the basement archive, right?
Yeah.
So my question is about the mechanics of these specific tools. How do things like recording booths or theater performances actually prevent a museum from feeling like a sanitized, curated textbook?
Well, the difference between a sanitized textbook and a truthful historical experience really comes down to the psychological concept of cognitive friction.
Cognitive friction.
Yeah. Curation is absolutely an act of selection. But when a museum deliberately places the darkest periods of a society, like the systemic oppression of segregation, directly alongside its most celebrated triumphs, like the Civil Rights Movement or hosting the Olympic Games,
Right.
it forces the human brain into a state of dissonance. It demands critical thinking. You cannot passively consume a single, cohesive, happy narrative when the physical space forces you to reconcile two wildly opposing realities simultaneously.
Because reading a wall plaque about history is entirely passive. You're just a recipient of someone else's conclusion.
And that is the exact mechanism that makes the interactive elements so vital. Stepping into a recording booth changes your brain chemistry in that moment. You are no longer absorbing, you are synthesizing.
You're forced to articulate a position or a reaction out loud.
Exactly. When you are confronted by a live actor in a Meet the Past performance, it creates a social confrontation with history. You have to actively engage with the messy, contradictory reality that history was made by profoundly flawed human beings.
People making difficult choices in real time under immense pressure.
Yes. The museum isn't claiming to hand you the absolute truth on a silver platter. It's forcing you to participate in the dialectic process of finding it.
It totally transforms history from a dusty trophy case to a live diagnostic tool for the present.
That's a great way to put it.
We're looking at societal mistakes and societal victories to calibrate our own current moral compass. But learning from the past isn't just about analyzing these massive, sweeping societal movements either.
Right. Sometimes the most profound cultural shifts can be seen in the micro.
Exactly. And the individual choices of single icons. And the blog post takes a sharp turn here, zooming in on an undisputed sports legend whose concept of legacy was entirely backward by today's standards.
Individual biographical stories often serve as the most effective, highly concentrated lenses for understanding broader cultural values. Who's the icon?
Permanent exhibit called Fair Play focuses intensely on the life of golfer Bobby Jones. Now, for anyone who doesn't obsessively follow golf history, Bobby Jones achieved the absolute ultimate feat in the sport. He won the Grand Slam of golf tournaments.
Which is incredibly rare.
Yeah, he was at the absolute zenith of the global athletic world. He possessed the highest level of tactical supremacy in his field. And then he just walked away.
Just like that.
Yeah. He left the sport at his absolute peak to become a lawyer at his father's law firm in Atlanta.
It remains a biographical pivot that genuinely stuns observers even a century later.
So what does this all mean? It makes me think our modern definition of success is completely broken. I mean, we currently operate under the assumption that success means dying on the stage. You perform until you literally cannot perform anymore.
Very true.
It would be like LeBron James winning the NBA Finals or Patrick Mahomes winning the Super Bowl, and while holding the championship trophy at the peak of their physical prime, they just casually announce they're going to work an office job with their dad.
It's totally bonkers when you frame it like that.
But Jones wasn't entirely done with the sport because he later played a massive role in establishing the Augusta National Golf Club and the Masters tournament. He gave up being the star player to do that.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals the fundamental difference between tactical success and strategic legacy. Our modern obsession with continuous visible performance, it actively limits long-term impact.
How so?
By stepping away from the grueling, daily friction of being an active competitor, Jones reclaimed the psychological bandwidth required to innovate the infrastructure of the sport itself.
Oh, wow. So true power wasn't winning the tournament. True power was owning the theater where the tournament happens.
He shifted from being a participant bound by the rules of the game to being the architect who designs the future of the game. Designing Augusta National and founding the Masters, that required a macroscopic view that a hyper-focused competitor simply cannot maintain.
Yeah, you can't see the forest for the trees when you're swinging the club every day.
Exactly. His pivot challenges the modern visitor to consider that the most profound way to shape a culture isn't by desperately clinging to the spotlight as a star player, but by stepping back to build the arena for the next generation.
He stepped off the green to build a bigger green. It is an incredibly inspiring look at legacy. But of course, not all legacies are universally celebrated like a prestigious golf tournament.
Exactly, no.
The Post moves us across the city to examine a much more complex, deeply polarizing cultural legacy. And this section of the deep dive proves that history is almost never a clean, universally agreed upon narrative.
Confronting polarizing artifacts is where the commitment to the unvarnished truth is truly tested. What's the site?
The blog post highlights the Margaret Mitchell House. This acts as the Midtown Atlanta home of the center, located at 979 Crescent Ave NE. It does require a separate admission from the main Buckhead campus, by the way.
Good to know.
The blogger describes this fascinating early 20th century architecture, which blends classic Southern charm with modern amenities. It houses a museum showcasing artifacts from her life. But the undeniable main draw, the reason people travel from all over the world to see it, is that it is the actual, literal, physical site where Margaret Mitchell wrote the 1936 novel Gone with the Wind.
Ah, a literary work that occupies one of the most highly contested spaces in the American cultural consciousness.
Exactly. And to be perfectly clear and strictly impartial regarding our source material, we have to look at exactly how the controversy is outlined here. The novel and the subsequent film adaptation became an undeniable, massive cultural phenomenon.
Huge. Global reach.
Right. It is widely celebrated by many for its sweeping narrative scope and its deeply complex characters. However, simultaneously, it faces significant, intense criticism for its portrayal of race and what many critics see as a dangerous romanticizing of the antebellum South.
The polarization is very real.
Very. As a result, this specific physical site operates as a major focal point for intense debates on historical accuracy, representation, and rapidly evolving cultural narratives. Some visitors walk through the doors viewing the house as a sacred shrine to a monumental literary achievement. Others walk through those same doors, seeing it as a stark, painful reminder of contentious, unresolved societal issues.
The building perfectly embodies the dual, often contradictory nature of historical memory. It's literally a single physical space generating wildly different emotional realities depending on who is standing in the room.
It is a physical building acting as a societal lightning rod. And I have a theory about this preservation aspect. We have this strong societal reflex today to simply erase or hide the artifacts that make us uncomfortable, you know?
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. The instinct is to bury the friction. But how does preserving the literal desk, the very room where a highly polarizing piece of art was created, actually help us process these incredibly complex cultural debates today? Doesn't keeping it around just keep the argument going?
This raises an important question about the fundamental nature of historical artifacts. The goal of a history center is not to resolve the argument. The goal is to provide a grounded space for the argument to happen.
Oh, that's interesting.
Preserving a contentious historical site in its original context is absolutely crucial for societal self-reflection. If you hide the artifact, you eliminate the control variable in our cultural experiment.
The artifact stays the same, but we change.
Precisely the mechanism at play. The physical space grounds the modern, often abstract cultural debate in physical reality. When you stand in the exact room where Gone with the Wind was written, you are not just engaging with a fictional story.
What are you engaging with?
You are engaging with the specific time, place, and societal mindset that produced that story. It allows the modern visitor to ask the mechanical how and why. How did this specific narrative resonate so powerfully on a global scale in 1936? And conversely, why has our societal reception of it shifted so dramatically in the decades since?
That makes total sense.
The physical desk, the architecture of the house, the text of the book, none of those things have changed. But the society observing them has evolved entirely.
So by keeping the physical site intact, the Atlanta History Center is essentially providing a neutral grounding wire for all that cultural electricity. Opposing viewpoints can actually intersect in a physical space rather than just shouting at each other across the internet.
Exactly. It becomes a tangible laboratory for understanding how cultural narratives evolve over time.
It circles back to the concept of cognitive friction we discussed earlier in the Gather Round Gallery. You do not have to agree with the artifact. You do not have to celebrate the artifact. But by confronting it in its real physical space, you are forced to define your own ethical and cultural position with crystal clarity.
The museum trusts the visitor with the heavy burden of complexity.
It assumes the visitor is smart enough to handle the unvarnished truth. And that brings the focus right back to you, the listener, navigating your own world right now. Tying this entire deep dive together, we have to reiterate Louis' main takeaway from his visit.
Which is?
Stepping into a space that openly, systematically showcases both the soaring highs and the deeply uncomfortable lows of history grants you profound new insights. It isn't an exercise in looking backwards for the sake of nostalgia. It is about extracting those unvarnished mechanical lessons from the past to actively architect a better future.
A meticulously curated museum equips you with the necessary context to navigate the overwhelming information of the present day. It provides a structural reminder that our current moment, with all its unique chaos and innovation, is simply the latest sedimentary layer on a very deep, very complex foundation.
And on a highly practical note, if you want to experience the friction of these layers yourself, the main center is located at 130 West Paces Ferry Road NW in Buckhead. They offer free on-site parking, which is an absolute logistical victory in any major city.
A massive victory.
Yeah, and they host special events during the Christmas season. And of course, the Margaret Mitchell House is located over in Midtown. As the blogger notes, if you're feeling particularly ambitious, you can easily tackle the historical weight of both campuses in a single day.
Immersing yourself in both the industrial foundation of the railroads and the polarizing cultural artifacts in a single afternoon, that would leave you with a tremendous amount of cognitive processing to do.
It would be the ultimate crash course in how a society builds itself, tears itself down, and rebuilds again. But before we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final, lingering thought experiment to ponder on your own.
I love a good thought experiment.
It builds on everything we've unpacked today about the extreme curation required to capture the unvarnished truth of an era.
Right, considering the meticulous selection process required to truthfully capture the essence of a massive, evolving city.
Imagine if future historians, say a full century from now, were tasked with building a brand new gather-round exhibit specifically about the decade we are all living in right now. What everyday artifacts or what specific types of interactive media would they absolutely need to include to truthfully, unvarnishedly capture our specific highs, our deepest societal lows, and our most fiercely polarizing controversies?
That's a heavy question.
It is. Look around you right now. What seemingly mundane object sitting on your desk or in your pocket will be the critical artifact they put in a glass case to understand how we functioned? It's something to think about as you navigate your own small piece of history today.